people through a debriefing cycle for experiential learning, and there was a handout that was posted on Facebook as well. So I welcome you to look through that either during or after the call. So over to you, Sabrina.
Thanks, Elena. Just before I start, I hear something. It kind of sounds like metal banging together. Is someone doing like a construction project?
Yep, that's me, Sarah. Yeah, so they're working on the sand point again, the second attempt.
Great. If you could just mute it maybe when Sabrina's talking, that would be great. Sabrina, Sarah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. And,
okay.
By the, at some point, if you want to jump in response to a question or something, of course you can unmute and speak up.
Okay, I just did it. Cool, it works.
Great.
Cool.
Thank you, Sarah. Over to you, Sabrina. And we're going to record the session so that we can post it online later. So over to you, Sabrina. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, Elena, for leading a great, introductory circle that just happened. And it highlighted for me, like there's sort of different things that come to mind when we hear the term experiential learning. And of course, a lot of what people are talking about is just life experiences that have happened, or attempting to do one thing, one activity, like Justin having a plan in mind and then realizing this isn't working and then adapting. And so that whole process of learning from experiences that we have in life, through reflecting and prayer and changing our minds and growing or changing, that's all a part of learning from experience. I wonder if there's some more background stuff. Maybe everybody could mute unless they're responding directly to the question, just so we have a good recording. Awesome, thanks guys. It's hard when there's so many mics going on. So it's funny because I was originally thinking of presenting sort of on experiential learning activities. So, when you, for example, on the Journey course, or on any of the YouLead courses that people have done, or like Michael and Philip both mentioned planned experiential learning activities. So there's like the planned activities that happen, and you have a learning objective and a design, like the balloon activity, and then a debriefing, a plan of questions that you're going to ask afterwards. And so my main focus is to help along the lines of facilitation skills and share a few ideas about how you lead that conversation around that kind of planned activity. But what I love what's come up here is how it's actually a very natural process. Learning from our experiences is kind of the way people tend to learn. And we contrast that with the learning that happens that we saw in schools for a long time, learning from books, learning from lectures, learning from someone sharing an abstract idea, which, that's what I'm doing right now. I mean, it was a bit more experiential because Elena said, let's all talk about, and so there was a story sharing. So that right there is an activity, and you can feel that there's more engagement and it's more alive than if I just came in and started speaking and sort of saying, this is what you should do, X, Y, Z. So the idea with experiential learning is that people are directly experiencing things, directly engaged in their learning, as opposed to someone telling them something or just reading an abstract idea. And so I'm not gonna talk a lot about the history of experiential education, but I am gonna send a link about that as follow-up. But some of you may be familiar with a few thinkers on experiential education, like John Dewey was a really prominent philosopher about education, and Kurt Hahn, who Sarah might be interested in some of his history because he started the Outward Bound schools, which I know, Sarah, you have background with Outward Bound. So experiential education, outdoor education is often a part of that. Paulo Freire, really amazing writer and thinker who wrote the Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So, but it's also, I think, very much in line. I mean, I wouldn't want to speak as an expert, but I think it seems to be a good match with more traditional Indigenous education paradigm as well, that people learn in the general course of life. And so, yeah, but I saw this bumper sticker one time, and it was like 20 years ago, and it's always stood out to me. It said, "Experience is inevitable, learning is not." Experience is inevitable, learning is not. So we can really go through life and have a bunch of experiences, but not change and grow. So what is the difference between just experiencing something and really learning? And a lot of it has to do with the balance of action and reflection. So, you know, you could ask ourselves, what would happen if I just took action all the time? Like in Justin's example, if you had a plan of action, this camp you were going to run, if you had just continued with this action, I'm going to plow through, I'm going to do this action without any reflection, like what would have happened, right? So there needs to be this reflective process always in relation to the experience that we're going through in order to learn, to change, adapt to what's happening. At the same time, some of us are much more prone to reflection, so we might, you know, sit on our couch and have all these deep thoughts and these great ideas and plan out a whole program model or something, or plan out a whole thing that we want to start and do, but never actually do it. So we're learning a lot in our mind, it feels like, but we're not actually applying it and then seeing how that plays out in real life. So that balance of action and reflection is really key. I just want to pause for a sec because I know it's kind of weird on the GoToMeeting. I can't see anyone. I don't know how you're reacting. Maybe you've all slumped over in your chairs. Does anyone have anything, just a comment or two they want to share about, you know, what is experiential learning or the need for action and reflection in your life?
Sure. Thanks, Sabrina. I laughed a couple times and everything, and I was totally imagining how you must be feeling, like you can't, no one's laughing at my jokes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was muted. I was laughing too.
Is anyone listening? Everyone's still on mute. I guess through all the stories and stuff that we all shared in our opening, it was all really about the beginning point was the relating, or like all the learning was how to relate to others. It's just kind of like that was maybe a moment for me as well in it all. That was sort of the thread between all of the stories, was that the experiences enabled us to relate to one another.
Mm-hmm.
Like the play, the laughter, just the empathy, like just being in a different set of shoes for a minute.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful reflection, Sarah, because I think it's not as talked about in experiential learning, but I think the idea of learning in relationship with other people is actually a really important part of experiential learning. Um, we're learning from experience along in relation to other people who are also having their own experiences and learning. So it's this back and forth almost dialogue that's happening between people as they learn. And people might be, 5 people might have the same experience and all learn something differently. And so that's part of why, you know, it can be so important and take learning to the next level when you actually have that conversation and debrief something. Okay, well, what did each of us experience and what are we taking from that? And is there anything shared that we're learning here? Which there doesn't have to be, but often there is. But even just to go through the process of hearing from each person what they're learning can be a big part of it. And then sharing the laughter about what happened or sharing the tears about what happened or, you know, going through that together is a really important part of it.
Yes,
Any
Sabrina,
further
also,
reflections?
this is Michelle. I just wanted to add to, like, one of the things that I really find is as you're doing that debriefing and you're actually getting people's perspective on either an activity or a story or, you know, whatever it might be, is that one person, especially when you're doing that in that group and that relatedness, because one person's experience all of a sudden will trigger additional things, I think, for other people as well, and relate and things that they hadn't thought about when, like, oh yeah, that, and just sort of the interconnections that happen between the learning, that it's individual and each one's learning their own piece, but with that sharing and that collectiveness of it, that somehow the learning goes deeper and on many levels into areas that they wouldn't have thought of necessarily.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so for me, I don't know if this is exactly what you're saying, but for me, it speaks to a kind of almost philosophy of democracy in education. So as opposed to a purely expert model where there's an expert on this, we just need to bring this expert into the room and let them talk, and they'll tell us all what we should think and learn and how we should feel and how we should change our life. And then we do it because they're the expert, versus really valuing and believing that when something happens, there's going to be all these different perspectives, and that the sum total, like all of those are important to creating a full shared understanding. There's an activity I used to really love. It's very simple, where you just have a circle of people sit down in a tight circle and put a Rubik's cube in the middle and just say, what color is this? You know, and so just really quickly highlighting the point that everyone from a different perspective is going to see a different color, but the truth is that all those colors are there, and there's even one that nobody can see that's on the floor. So even if we all shared our perspective, there's still a missing piece of the truth that's always sort of in mystery or unspoken. And so, yeah, it's very more a global approach to, we want to hear all the voices here and learn from everybody. Is that what you were talking about at all, Michelle, or did I take that in a totally different place?
No, I think that that definitely is part of it, and but partly in the sharing is when, if you don't actually take the opportunity to have that type of sharing or that conversation, then, you know, you talked about the conversation being the critical piece, because if in that conversation those perspectives are shared, but if there's never space for that conversation, you don't understand that. And I think so much of learning, typical people will do activities, but they won't have the conversation after. And so the richness and the learning pieces are lost.
Yes, I see. Yes, definitely. Yeah, and when I first started facilitating experiential activities, I really thought the gold was in the activity because it was so fun to finally, you know, not be sitting, as I grew up in schools, like sitting at desks in rows, and, you know, it felt very liberating, both as a participant and as a leader, to get people up and moving, go outside, you know, throw balloons at each other, like, and learn something, and it felt wonderful. But then over time, I realized, oh yeah, equally important is the conversation. Equally important, or more important, is to make sure that that conversation happens at the end, so that there's that time to make sense of it. Otherwise, people are still learning. They're still probably in their mind is naturally going through a learning reflective process, but it's not externalized, it's not shared with others, it doesn't go to the same level of learning. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that cycle that you would take people through. And for some of you, this might be stuff you're really familiar with, so feel free to like jump in with your words of wisdom too, you know. But, well, I guess I wanted to ask a kind of leading question first. What do you think, does anyone have an idea what is the main tool that you use if you're leading a debriefing?
Question?
Yeah, who said that?
Sarah.
Hey, Sarah, awesome. Yeah, it's questions. So this is like, again, I guess learning from my own experience, where at first I would kind of have in mind like, okay, I'm going to do this. I mentioned the Rubik's Cube activity. I'm going to do the Rubik's Cube activity, and it all leads to some reflective conversation. But at the end, I say, oh, look how we all look from different perspectives, and there's these different colors, and there's one underneath. Like, I still had a kind of almost like mini answer or mini lecture in my mind. So it's good to have that sense of where do I want to take this activity, what theme do I maybe want to take the group towards with the debriefing, but to really make fundamental the use of the question and the idea that we're really trying to bring out what is inside of all the people here through questions, as opposed. So the more that I'm saying answers or saying statements to the group, the less that I'm actually in that questioning facilitative mode. So that's just one thing that I use to like check myself sometimes, is am I asking a question, or am I making a statement to this group? Or is this if I am asking a question, is it truly an open-ended question, or is it like a leading question? I'm trying to be conscious when I'm doing that. So I think that's one important thing to kind of keep in mind, is the question is central. So, and with the questions, there's a typical kind of flow, and like I mentioned in the I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at the handout, but I'm sure you guys know there's like many different models or different ways of describing kind of the main steps that you go through, but they're all basically the same. They're pretty, people call things different things, but it's essentially the first stage after completing some kind of activity is to look at the part, to try to kind of elicit from people the part that can't really be argued with, the kind of like what happened that we can say happened. So that might be facts about some, like, okay, this person, we were playing with the balloons, and then it bounced off of so-and-so, and it flew aside, and then it hit the ground, and nobody picked it up. And we stood there in silence for a couple minutes. That's kind of like everyone can agree that's in a nutshell the basics of what happened. And then the other part of what happened is what happened inside each person, which again can't really be argued with. Like if I tell you that really made me feel sad and made me think about a nephew that I lost. So that's my experience of what I'm feeling and thinking. And someone else might have a completely other thought that might be a really happy thought about resilience. So that's kind of all in this first stage of figuring out what happened in the group actually, and in each person's interior thought and feeling world. So that's where you can ask questions like, so what did you see? What did we hear? What happened? And even getting into details like, so when the ball bounced over there, how did you feel? Or, I noticed so-and-so that you're your face really seemed to change, your expression really changed when that happened, like what was going on for you at that time. So all these sorts of questions. I'll just summarize the next two steps, and then we can go back and talk more about this as a group. But then the next piece is the part where you're kind of getting into a little bit more of what does this mean? What are we learning, making sense of this, relating this particular activity or experience that just happened to something larger, like a theme, like you might have had a theme of trust or a theme of respect for diversity or great increase in cultural awareness or something. And this is the part where there can be more volatility, more disagreement or a sharing of different ideas. A lot of their cultural meaning comes in here. So, how someone from one culture makes sense of what just happened might be very different from how another person makes sense of that, because they have a different belief system, or even people from the same culture may have very different values. So it's a chance to share ideas. So that's where we're going to ask more questions about, so what did that mean to you when that happened? And what does that make you think of in life? What does this remind you of in your personal lives? Or, what does this teach us about trust? What are we learning here? What is this about? Okay. And then to make sure that you gain closure is to go into the final conversation that's more about, so wrapping up, like, so what does this mean now? How am I going to change based on this conversation? Is there anything I would do differently when I go back into my normal life? Or is there something that I might try differently? And it can be, if this is an actual planned activity, sometimes you can build this learning loop in and then go into the same, if it's a good activity that's like interesting enough to repeat, you can go into the same activity again and see if people can like, for example, if it's, have you guys ever done, there's an activity called the human knot. So you all stand in a circle and everybody reaches their right hand in and grabs a hand. Everyone reaches their left hand in and grabs a hand. So you're kind of this big knot of arms. And then the goal is to untwist yourselves without letting go of hands until you're standing in a big circle again. So sometimes I'll do that with a group, and once we debrief and figure out what we learned, then I'll give them the challenge, let's do it again and see if you can do it faster, or let's see if you can do it again and this time without talking, or to apply the learning in the activity, as well as what are we learning that we can take back into our lives. So those are that's like a high level quick overview of the learning cycle, and I have a few other like tips and comments about that, but I just want to pause again since I can't see anybody, and see if anyone has comments or questions about this idea of the cycle and going through these kind of steps of questions. I've stunned you all into silence.
I'll just add, I wanted to share sort of my own process a little bit as you're talking, Sabrina, and I was thinking of Justin's story and his experiential thing, and from that I was reflecting on, and then going into that place of, so what would I do differently, or how would I then support people to be able to think through some of that? Because what I heard was really that you can't really do anything until you have a relationship. So that you can have whatever plan you have, but until you've built that relationship and that trust, you can't actually move into other activities. And so it's interesting in terms of a process that you're describing, which I think is really, really helpful to have those kind of set questions and those 3 steps to actually do the debrief. But then also being able to apply that as you're listening to other not just to an activity itself and in debriefing, but also even in terms of hearing other people's experiences with that.
Yeah, so you're kind of talking about how, well, if I'm hearing you right, like for me, it's like when I have, now that I've kind of got these sort of steps into my head, I don't think of them as steps necessarily specifically, but when I'm listening to people, it's almost this natural learning curve that I'm going, or listening curve of like trying to understand, okay, what happened for them? Oh, what did that mean for them? How did that change them? So really, I mean, that's the whole cycle right there, just as a listening frame as well. Does anyone else want to comment?
I thought your piece on the balance of action and reflection was really good.
Ah, so and what did you like about that?
It's just that it's really true, you can't, tug it, it's a tug and push kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can't have too much without the other, and it doesn't work if you're leaning on one side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a real polarity in life. There's actually a neat little assessment tool people can do. It's like a questionnaire, and it helps you place yourself as a learner. And like some people are way far on the action end, and some people are really far in the reflection end, and some people are very balanced. They're naturally kind of integrate both. But you know, so it can be a struggle, but an amazing diversity to have people who are more reflective and have people who are more action oriented in a group. And you'll feel that struggle. Some people are just like, we've been talking too long. We need to just do, I don't even care what we do. We just need to make a decision and do it. Like I'm going crazy. And then other people are saying, whoa, we need to think about this. We need to like really have a plan. That like, I don't know, we have to really all be on the same page about why we're doing this and how we're going to do it. And,
Kind of weird if it was a personality piece as well.
Yeah, exactly. Where, yeah, some people are prone to, and similarly, leading activities, like some people will love the activity and then start rolling their eyes. We start to do a debriefing. They don't really want to talk about it. And other people, it's really hard to get them out of their seats to actually do an activity. They'd prefer to sit there and just continue in a more dialogue all day. So,
But also being aware too, right? I suppose was another portion I was thinking about.
Can you say more about that? Being aware?
Um, being aware of the balance and reflection, especially when you're in a teaching setting,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
especially how it's going to come across to the people that you're with,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that they have the best possible outcome and that you're basically whatever you're doing is on point.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping that in a happy medium, which I'm assuming, and I know from a bit of experience, is that it's a lot harder than it seems.
Yeah. But I love what you're saying about just noticing that, like noticing for yourself, okay, am I someone who tends to be more action oriented or reflection? Then think about how's that going to affect the way I present information to a group or the way that I lead an activity. Whether that's more of a formal presentation or it's some kind of experience in the bush with, at a camp. Um,
Not
yeah,
also.
being aware of that. And then the people.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just thinking that it also, not just from personality to how you present, but also it bleeds into relationships.
Mm. Right, like you mean the relationship between two, like if someone's more action or someone's more reflective, or
Oh no, I
And I
meant
think,
between people.
mm, yeah.
Anyway, well, let's keep going.
Yeah, thank you.
Sabrina, I wanted to thank you for really laying out the different steps so well and using so many different examples. For me, it was really useful and I learned a lot as well. And I was curious about this questionnaire that you mentioned about, you know, where do you situate yourself between action and reflection? And I'd love to see that. And I think it, you know, it might, it also speaks not only to experiential activities, but maybe project learning as well and life.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely.
And just before we need to shift into the advisory topics, do you think you could share a few tips that you had mentioned about self-correcting or, you know, things that you're mindful of as um, you know, facilitate debriefing experiential activities?
Yeah, thanks, Selena. One thing that I think is really important is respecting where the group is at in this cycle because so like sometimes the tendency might be okay, we have, 7 minutes to debrief. So one thing is depending on the level of intensity of experience to make sure that you allow it enough time. So if something might provoke a lot of emotion or potentially provoke a bit of conflict, to make sure to give like almost as much time debriefing as you spent on the activity, or if not, at least a half to three quarters equivalent time for debriefing. If something's just a quick and easy, fun energizer, you might not choose to debrief it at all, or you might give it a 2 minute debriefing. But in the situation of a more intensive debriefing, um, in terms of respecting the group, one thing that I've noticed will happen is that if you sort of try to rush or skip a stage, people will let you know through they won't tell you, you've skipped the first stage of experiential debriefing. But if you listen to them, they're stuck in it. So for a big one is not giving enough time for people to share their feelings and thoughts and observations. So you're trying to move to like, so what does this tell us about trust? But someone has still sitting with the feeling of like, I'm still really upset because during that activity, like I got knocked to the ground and I haven't had a chance to talk about how I feel about that. Or it might be something less dramatic, like someone's just having this um, sitting with some kind of reflection, and they're maybe not speaking up as much, but you can sense when you try to move on to the learning part of the conversation that there's unfinished business in terms of just expressing what happened, describing the story together of what happened. So if people are still telling the story of what happened, I'll not in my head there can be that moment of tension, like I want to pull them ahead, but to also respect the group and say they're not done. And if I have the time and space to be able to do it, to like sit with that longer. Or similarly, it can happen where you're having this great reflective conversation, you're into like some meaning making where we're all sharing stories about um, um, leadership and all these, all this learning about leadership is, and people are sharing from different cultural perspectives, different values about leadership. We've gotten into this great conversation, but I'm running out of time, so I want to say, so what are we all going to do different about leadership? I want to make that shift to like people walking away with some new intention or new kind of idea of something they're going to try, but people are so engrossed in conversation that they're not ready. So I'm trying to say, what are you going to do with this? And they're still grappling, So to respect that, and sometimes it means saying like, let's come back to what are we going to do with this tomorrow or later on today. Let's just all sit with this, keep chatting over lunch about this, and then, to just not just go through the motion with these things, but to really see what the group looks like in each of these modes and stay with them where they are. And push them along, but also respect the speed of the process for this group. So I think that's a really important caveat, not to drag people through this wheel. Um, And then the only other idea I was going to share is just to, it helped me a lot when I was learning this cycle to use it in my own daily life. So in my journal where I try to write I don't write every day, but I try to journal. And when something would happen in life, instead of just saying how I thought and felt, I would try to ask myself kind of the questions like, okay, what happened? How did I feel? What does this mean to me, or what does this make me think about? What do I maybe want to do differently? So just to practice going through those questions in relation to our own life experiences can help prepare us to lead others through that kind of cycle. And again, just to remember, like it's actually a really natural flow. It's just being conscious about this flow that already naturally happens. So that's about it for me, unless anyone has any other comments or questions. I think we said this would go till about 11:10, 11:15, so we have time for a few more comments. If anyone, who hasn't, I don't know if
Yeah, hi.
Justin or Chancellor.
Hi, Sabrina. Philip here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. This is a great discussion. One thought I had as we were speaking is, in addition to the action reflection kind of dynamic that you've been speaking about, I think there's another really interesting one, which is how in our work using experiential tools is this really great learning space in regards to kind of the deeper learnings that are emerging as a group, and really looking at collective learning and group wisdom as part of that. And I find as a facilitator, it's been a really great journey for me to try and develop skills to be open and listening for those deeper and sometimes it's even things that aren't being said. It's like a silence in the group, or an uneasiness perhaps, or a tension, or maybe it's that feeling of joy and play that Michael was talking about. But to be really open to those deeper kind of group dynamics that are going on, and particularly to try and help us all as both learners and teachers and facilitators to bring those group learnings to the surface, because it's so much at the heart of the work that we're doing with youth and communities in regards to, tensions and some of those struggles that Justin was speaking about earlier, as well as the strengths that we have as communities. I don't know if that makes sense, but I find that's another really interesting dynamic, kind of the individual group learning opportunities that experiential opportunities bring forward.
Am I still on the call?
Yeah.
Did that come
Am I around?
It's like Sabrina's microphone stopped working, so
Yes,
she, a bit of a pause. Thank you, Philip, for mentioning the importance of really being mindful of those moments or opportunities for that collective wisdom and collective learning and group wisdom. Michael, did you have a point that you wanted to mention? I see you've written a few things on the chat bar.
Yeah, I have construction going on behind me, so I'm conscious that I don't want to give everybody that experience. But very quickly to say thank you to Sabrina. This is not an easy process to take people through. And I think she's done a really great job, and I really like the diagram. In terms of experiential learning, I really think that the foundation is really important. People come in their vulnerability and their fear and whatever else they might be coming in with. And I think it's part of our task to help people move beyond that as quickly as possible. But it requires real clarity in relation to why you're there, and what the action or what the outcome for the purpose of being there. But just helping people to become themselves in a respectful, collaborative, and connected way. So I've liked what I've heard, and all of that's there. Yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you, Michael. That's really helpful. Any other closing comments from Cheyenne or Chancellor Justin before we shift into the other more administrative advisory topics?
I think just from my part, it's just more of a comment and just saying, following along with Michael and just saying that Sabrina did a really good job and even helping me look at debriefing in a different way and thinking about how there's people that are more reflective and people that take more action, and then the middle ground where people can do both. And it got me thinking, oh, at the beginning I was like, oh, I guess I'm more of a reflective person. I like to kind of sit and listen and then offer whatever knowledge and teachings that I would have. But then I thought about, on the other hand, I'm like, oh, well, I guess, I do take action when it's needed as well. So just kind of highlighting that point that it just helped me look at it in a different way. So as you know, me and Sabrina have talked before, and just reflecting with each other, whether it's just stuff in our life or stuff with YouLead, we always end up having a really good conversation and just reflecting with each other. So reflection for me has always been a powerful tool, and it's definitely helped me to grow and to blossom into someone that I never thought I would be. And it definitely comes from experiential learning, from going to school and pursuing that journey when I used to be afraid of school, and but realizing that it's just the teachings that I was brought up with, and being a good person, and then and essentially everything I do, and as everybody knows already, that everything I do in life is for my son. It's for Quentin. So coming to school and being a part of the Indigenous Studies program really helped me to reflect a lot more when I never used to do that before. So that's why I always tell people, I'm here with open arms, and I'm always here to listen and offer whatever I say. Just want to thank Sabrina for that, and that's just just what I want to come on. Thank you.
Chance and power of reflection. I think we have time for one more closing comment. Sarah or Justin, one more closing comment.
I have some comments.
Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
I found this nice, very helpful. I was totally stuck on the at the so what part. I forgot the now what part, so that was a good reminder. That idea of transferable skills. And I just thought of a quick closing question, because it all started with relating. So how does that learning help you in your relationship with others, etc.? Also, thank you for the Rubik's Cube quick note. That, in combination with practicing in a journal, is really exciting to me at this moment. Yeah, thank you. It was really good.
Thank you. Great. Thank you for that, Sarah. And since you were talking about the importance of kind of learning with others, it's a good segue to our next learning session, which will feature Sarah, Sandy, and the topic will be how to lead collaborative team building to address community issues, and it will be on Wednesday, October 12th at 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. And we'll also have a session in November 9th. Hosted by Chancellor, called What Leadership Means from a Personal, Family, and Cultural Perspective. And, certainly share your ideas with the team if there are other topics that you would like to contribute or learn about. So I think we'll just take a little pause to thank Sabrina again for sharing her experiences with experiential learning, and for everyone for contributing and sharing their ideas and questions. So if anybody would like to leave the call, this would be a good time to